Diplomats act as agents for their government, advocating for their policies and negotiating on their behalf. They establish facilitative relationships with host country elites, analyzing local developments and reporting these effectively back to their governments for actioning designed to advance national interests. Welcome to the Diplomat Couch. I am your host, Osli Matsikenyeri. On today's episode, we are joined by Zimbabwe's former ambassador to Ghana and Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Ambassador Pavlin Tendai Musaka. Ambassador, thank you for joining us on the Diplomat Couch.
Thank you very much.
What was your most memorable experience during your time as Zimbabwe's ambassador to Ghana?
Yes, my most memorable event when I just arrived in Ghana was that after a month I arrived in the beginning of December. By 29th of December, I was given an opportunity to present my credentials. I presented to the then president, Mr. Akufo, John Akufo, and behind him was the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, who's Dr. Akufo Addo. And soon after, when I was leaving Ghana, that same foreign minister at the time, I was actually bidding to him in his farewell to him in his capacity as the President of the Republic of Ghana. So it was a very interesting experience that I went through, that he had been elevated to that stage under the NPP government that was ruling then. But in between those 12 years, the NDC was ruling Ghana under Professor Atamils, and then he was succeeded, when he passed away, was succeeded by his deputy, who is His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. And as you know, he has also done a comeback, just like we have in the United States of America. Donald Trump has come back as president. So the same with President John Dramani Mahama. He has come back after the NPP was in government. So it's a very interesting experience that I went through, and also the way they change governments under the political parties is more like a football game. One party today is in the office, and then when they lose, they take the other side in parliament, and then the other government comes in. I observed that, and to me it was a very interesting experience.
And the experience of being Dean of the Diplomatic Corps during your time in Ghana?
Yes, after serving the 12 years in Ghana, the last 5 years I was Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. All diplomats accredited to Ghana, and in all the international organizations, that's the heads of those international organizations, I was the Dean. And in addition to that, I was also the Dean of the Africa Group of Ambassadors, the Dean of the SADC Ambassadors, the Dean of the Women Ambassadors. So it was a very hectic program that I went through, but career-wise, it was really something that I experienced at the peak of my career as a diplomat. And not many ambassadors are able to become dean, even for a month. So it was quite an achievement that I was there for 5 years.
A very colorful resume, Ambassador. You highlighted the political differences during your time in Ghana. What are some of the cultural differences between Zimbabwe and Ghana, and how did you navigate them?
What was very interesting about their culture in comparison to our own culture here in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa in general? In West Africa, including Ghana itself, their culture is still very rich and traditional. And I believe if the way to really market their culture even to many nationals within our region, this is really a serious tourism attraction. But they do that, is true even to the whole world. And then I actually attended the 10th anniversary of the current Asante Hini, the second, who is ruling in the Ashanti region. And again, you see even the ornaments that are bringing, I think some of them, they must be from the 100th century or something. Centuries ago, I could not even think we have any of those in our own possession, but they have them as traditional leaders. They've kept them intact. In our case, the colonization disturbed our culture a lot. so we don't showcase those artifacts at all. That was a major difference.
And was this rich Ghanaian culture a contributory factor to you founding and creating African Diplomat Designer Way?
Would you believe it? When I was growing up, I was actually born I'm a diasporan. I was born in Lusaka, Zambia in 1958, 4th of April. When I went to school, when I was still in primary school, my late father used to bring a lot of magazines home. And I recall we could not read at that time, so we'd be going through the pages, going the pictures. But I recall seeing one picture, and it was of a lady who was serving at the United Nations, and the lady was very dark and wearing some blue outfit and with black patches. That's what I recall, and I said, I want to be a diplomat. So since that time, and the fact that I actually became a diplomat, this is why I decided to call my company, which I'm the founder and my husband is one of the directors, is called the African Diplomat. I am the African Diplomat. I went through all that. So what you see here is actually a fusion of a lot of the experiences that I've had. In total, I was just counting them. I actually visited 39 countries. When I include Zimbabwe, it's 40 countries. So it's an experience of what I picked in many of those countries during the course of my duty.
Ambassador, when we come back, we're going to discuss on how clothing and attire impacts diplomats' effectiveness and maybe the inspiration behind the designs that you have. Don't miss the second segment of today's episode of The Diplomat Couch. Zimbabwe maintains relations with various countries around the world and maintains close diplomatic relations with neighboring countries and nations on the African continent. Welcome back to the second segment of today's episode of The Diplomat Couch, where we're joined by the former ambassador of Zimbabwe to Ghana, Mrs. Pavlin Tendai Musaka. Ambassador, before the break, we had touched on the cultural differences between Ghana and Zimbabwe in the diplomatic mission setup. Why did you choose to focus on Zimbabwean ethnic wear, and what does it represent in the context of African culture and diplomacy?
In my diplomatic career, where I started in Ghana Canada as my first posting, then United Kingdom as my second posting, and then Ghana as my third posting. I really went through a lot in terms of what I was exposed to in the different cultures. And at the same time, I always loved to dress in a very dignified way because of the career that I chose as a diplomat. And it trains you to be very modest in your dressing. And I felt in our country, Zimbabwe, and even in the international market in Africa, there is room for us to come with designs which are uniquely African. And that can actually be attractive even to the tourists, no matter which continent they are in. And also on the African continent, our target market is really beyond Africa. And if you go through the collection that we have here, you will notice that there is a range of designs, but mainly catering for the international market. That's because of my exposure. And then when I went to Ghana, that's when I was really put to task. I had a difficulty in finding what to wear, because their culture is so rich, and you are forced to also wear what is Zimbabwean. And that time we didn't have a Zimbabwean national fabric. So I used to improvise. If you go through even the range that we have here, you see some of the kente, they're hand woven, but using the Zimbabwean national flag colors. We had to improvise, even my clothing itself. So I decided when I came back home that I am going to be the brand ambassador for the Zimbabwe national fabric, and I will make the designs that suit the market, as I said, throughout the whole globe. And this is what you find in terms of the range. This is where my interests, our designs are really uniquely African.
You mentioned that during your time in the UK, Canada, modesty was one of the elements that you contributed to your dressing. So what are some of the other elements when it comes to formal diplomatic engagements, and how can one ensure that they are appropriately dressed?
Yes, also when I came back home from Ghana, I was the chief director in charge of protocol, conference services. And in between, before I went to the United Kingdom, I also, after my tour of duty in Canada, I was the head undersecretary in charge of the protocol department. This is why when I was mentioned earlier that I've traveled to 39 countries. I'm not talking about those where I transited. I'm just talking about where I actually arrived and my passport was stamped 39, and Zimbabwe is the 40th. I got a lot of exposure, and what I learned when our nationals are dressing, this is my message to them, both the men and women, especially our women. Whenever we dress, we must know what occasion to wear and what kind of dress you must wear. When you are going to the beach, it's allowed that you can wear your shorts, and because you are with your family or your boyfriend, whatever. But when you are actually, like we had the SADC Heads of States summit, and we have ambassadors who are accredited to, foreign ambassadors who are accredited to Zimbabwe, at that point, we expect our people to wear in a very dignified manner. This is a message I'm sending to the young and trendy. There's nothing wrong with you wearing very fancy clothes, but just remember to be dignified. You are not, whatever dressing you are wearing is not being seen by only your Zimbabwean people. Foreigners are also here in Zimbabwe. The tourists, they wonder, is this the way Zimbabwean dress? I think we've almost polluted our culture. I'm saying let's clean up our culture, let's dress decently in a dignified way. People will respect you. Your image is really up there if you dress decently. This is my message to them.
Now that you've shared about dressing, what other advice can you give to young professionals aspiring for a career in diplomacy regarding developing a personal brand and other issues besides dressing?
Yes, serving in the foreign service like I did my whole working life, 39 years. I retired in December 2023. My whole working life was in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs International Trade. After leaving University of Zambia, I came back home. If you want to, whatever career you take it up, please make sure that it's one of those where you really enjoy it. In the case of the foreign service, it's one of those careers that require maximum discipline, because when you're serving at home, whatever you do in terms of your professional conduct, it can tarnish the bilateral relations or international relations with the foreign countries. So you have to be somebody who's well groomed. This is why in my other life I'm also a consultant on protocol, etiquette and grooming. We need people who have a correct image, who take the correct image of our country. Whether they're here in Zimbabwe, they're interacting with the delegates, they must be dressed in a very formal way and also conduct themselves professionally. Professionalism is really the gateway to success.
Thank you for giving us those insights and sharing tips to aspiring diplomats and professionals. Envoys, as government representative in different countries, are tasked to balance cultural and personal style. Join us after the break as we delve more into the experiences of former ambassador of Zimbabwe to Ghana, Ambassador Musaka. Zimbabwe-Ghana relations date back more than 60 years ago, and the two founding fathers, Comrade Robert Mugabe and Kwame Nkrumah, were bound by the same Pan-African ideology. If you're just joining us, this is the Diplomat Couch, and on today's episode, we have former ambassador of Zimbabwe to Ghana, Mrs. Pavleen Tendai Musaka. Ambassador, just before the break, we were discussing etiquette and protocol and dressing. What are some of the common mistakes when it comes to diplomat etiquette, and how can one ensure that they are respectful to different cultures?
Thank you very much for asking that question. Whenever one gets an invitation to any embassy's reception, dinner, or luncheon, always do your research to know what is the culture of the ambassador you are visiting, what is their religion, so that you don't err in terms of your dressing. When you are going to a Muslim, the Arabs mainly in the Muslim countries, you actually have to dress in very long clothing, especially for the ladies, and make sure that you have none of your shoulders, arms are showing. You don't wear anything sleeveless, cover yourself almost 95%, so that you don't cause any embarrassment on the part of your host. And then when you are going to those countries again, do your research through their embassies here and find out, when I go to your country, what are the do's and don'ts for me. Like what I mentioned earlier in the last episode was that about our dressing. What you think is normal dressing here, wearing shorts and during the day, and you're walking in the street in Harare, you can't do that in the Muslim world. You'll be stopped that you go back to your home and go and dress appropriately. So what we're just saying, be sensitive to other people's cultures. Even a very simple example was there was a very serious, a very formal event where our head of state, His Excellency President Mnangagwa, here was officiating. This is at the Pomona dam site. And one of our own guests, a young lady, was not dressed appropriately, and she sat in the front row. And I was so embarrassed then as chief director to be advised by one of the female ambassadors to say, one of your nationals is embarrassing the ambassadors here. They're complaining that she's seated in the front row and she's not dressed appropriately. She was wearing a very short dress and in the front row, and this is not allowed whenever foreigners are there. Please, whenever you are attending any event where there are foreigners, dress decently, because you cause embarrassment on the part of the host and also your guests that are there.
With all this experience that you've brought to African Diplomat Designer Way, what legacy do you hope to leave in the world of diplomacy, international relations, and fashion?
Yes, our company, the African Diplomat, we're actually celebrating our 15th anniversary this year in September. We were founded 15 years ago. And the legacy that I would like to leave is that we employ, even when you see our own employees that are here, we have 2 interns from Gweru Polytechnic who have just joined us. They joined us at the beginning of this year. And then we have one of the graduates from the vocational colleges here. He is a permanent employee. And we're getting another lady who's coming from the CBD. She's going to join us. She's a more mature lady who's going to be their supervisor because she's got a hands-on experience. The legacy that I would like to leave is for those graduates that are finishing their education with the paper qualification. They need to be industry ready. Our company actually is registered as the African Diplomat Vocational College. We actually empower the youths. I'm proud to say over the past 15 years, we've trained one of our graduates only at 2 O-levels. She's now sewing clothes, designer wear that she learned in this shop, in this African Diplomat. And she's sewing for the upmarket, the Pokelos in Zimbabwe. So you can see we really empower them so that they can aim very high. I as a founder, have a lot of satisfaction when I see somebody who was almost very poor and not able to do much. When I empower them, I'm very satisfied. Then there's another one who also started her own company in town. She owns her own shop now. She's doing her own business and she's looking after her family. When you go to the village in Mondoro, where she came from, where she comes from, you can see the mother now has solar powered, the house is lit, and everything, the whole family has been lifted up. And that is very satisfying for me. That's a legacy I would like to leave. Youth empowerment and women's empowerment is actually our goal.
Ambassador, March was International Women's Month, and we are all working towards greater representation and empowerment of women in various fields. What advice, as your parting word, what advice would you give to young women who are hoping to enter into the field of diplomacy and international relations?
Yes, thank you very much for asking that question. At this point in time, we are all celebrating after the successful election of one of our honorable ministers, Honorable Kirsty Coventry, who is now president of the International Olympic Committee. You can tell that when you are determined to achieve a certain goal, when I saw her giving her speech in terms of the acceptance speech of our election, I said to myself, this must be how she must have been fighting her way to win even those gold medals in the swimming pool. So this is what it takes. You need to be a go-getter, keep focused on what you want to achieve. It's just like the African diplomat. We started off 14 years ago. This is our 15th year, and we have been persevering. We have not given up. It's a struggle, but we are just rebranding ourselves as the African diplomat, which is very successful, and we are looking forward to even growing bigger and going outside Zimbabwe. So that's my parting word to the young ones. Keep focused.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Msaka, for sharing your invaluable experience and insights, not only as Zimbabwe, former ambassador of Zimbabwe to Ghana, but also as the Dean of Diplomat Corps, and your 39 years of experience within the diplomatic and international relations arena.
Thank you very much.
And to our viewers, I hope this episode has given you a unique perspective into the world of diplomacy and fashion, personal style, personal branding. Until next time, pleasant viewing.